Very good morning to you all. It is just about 11:35 a.m. I'm coming to you live from Johannesburg South, LA. Yes, not Los Angeles, but AKA Lower Alberton in Johannesburg, South Africa. It's South African Standard Time, 11:35, and we are online with a 120-day campaign, Faith Action to End Gender-Based Violence. We will be having in a few short moments with us Charlene van der Walt, Head of Gender and Religion School of Religion, Philosophy and Classics, UKSN Deputy Director of Ujamaa Center. If you're online and you've got your video here with us, you're welcome just to switch on your video and wave your hands and say hello. And then also check in with us in the chat box. Maybe you want to put your name and your contact details. So we've got Vusi Tsebekulu. Hey, Vusi, good to have you here. Vusi was our honored speaker at the launch of the series of conversations. So good to have Vusi. Yeah, please tell us where you're at, who's here with us. If you're on Facebook Live, we've got Andile Maposa, my colleague who's here handling the tech with us. He'll bring in some of your greetings via Facebook Live. But we're in this time. It's the 9th of December, and we're looking forward to this awesome show. Well, at the get-go, looks like Charlene has arrived, and she's in our virtual studio. So let me say what's up to Charlene. Hey, Charlene.
Hi, good morning, Seth and colleagues who's joined us. It's such an interesting time that we're living in, Seth. Would have been lovely to be in Lower Alberton with you in person, but nonetheless, a joy to be with you.
LA, yeah, LA, Lower Alberton.
Oh, I love that.
Online via Zoom. Before we continue to speak, maybe we can, if you just want to say hello to us, those Zoom folk that are here, you're welcome to please put in your contact details, your name, and which organization you was part of. The work that we're doing with Faith Action is to build a network of people that are learning and caring and sharing together. Some may call it a community of practice. So if you're out there, please greet us online. Let us know who you are, where you're from, which organization you're with. And if you've got a special way to greet, I like saying, hola, heita, wat se, what get up, was get up. And if I had to take it to my African Indian heritage, I'll bring it in with Vanden Nalu. So yeah, Charlene, for you, how's the way that you greet everybody when you're breaking it down?
How's it, colleagues?
How's it, colleagues? I love it. How's it, colleagues? Charlene, where are you coming to us from this afternoon? I know that while I'm in Johannesburg, you're in another part of the country. So where are you at?
Seth, yes, good morning. This morning, I'm greeting you and all the colleagues on Zoom from the mother city. Just last night, we launched the Good Samaritan Memorial Lecture at the Labia in Cape Town. We thought a little bit about main masculinity and homophobic hate crime. So that conversation is still very fresh in me. And I think it will inform in a deep way also what I'll be sharing with you all this morning.
Awesome. And was it a live event, or were you guys in person, or was it online?
Seth, it's an interesting project. It's a flagship project for the Ujamaa Center. So last year in 2020 with COVID, it's a lecture that we hosted every year in person. But then in 2020, of course, we had to come up with a new plan, and we partnered with a very talented videographer that helped us to record last year's lecture with Kuleka Patuma, the South African queer poet. And then we just saw how the video format, that medium, how that took off. So this year we traveled to the Eastern Cape, to Pedi, to have a conversation with Professor Zethu Matibeni. And we launched a digital lecture. So you can go onto YouTube, just search Good Samaritan 2021. And the lecture is available online, really profound and provocative thinking and discussion. But then we said, wow, it's been 2 years of sitting alone in our corners. Let us risk meeting in person. So we had 2 watch parties, one in Pietermaritzburg and then last night in Cape Town.
Beautiful. Those of you that can see the already just in the get-go, Charlene mentioned, male masculinity and homophobic violence. Well, if you're online with us via Zoom and you've seen the promo and Facebook Live, you would know that the topic for today is integrating spirituality and sexuality. And let me just say at the get-go, for some of us, these two are in some bit of our customs, our culture, our traditions of business and faith, and where we come from. By and large, many people don't even see this topic interacting at the crossroads, leave alone talking about integrating spirituality and sexuality. And we're going to get into that. As we come online, I'm honored to have Charlene with us. We're going to take a moment just now, just to get to know the person. But I see that there are a few of us that are here, and you are online. We've got about 10 to 15 people that are kind of signing on. And as you come in, please say hello to us. Tell us which organization you're with. It'll be lovely to have you in the network of Faith Action to End Gender-Based Violence. And let me say a little bit about the partners, and more especially Faith Action. About a year ago, organizations came together with the focus pretty much that had brought up the exacerbation of gender-based violence in 2020. And so organizations like We Will Speak Out, if you look at the poster that even captures this conversation in the series, We Will Speak Out, UN Women, Solidarity Trust, all got together with a host of faith-based organizations, FBOs, some of them churches, some of them development organizations, some of them linked with other religious organizations, to really get into the work of saying, what can we do in a time of COVID-19 where gender-based violence has pretty much been exacerbated? This is not to say that it wasn't there, but it has been exacerbated. And so hello to you as well, Saman Shali. And so if you're working in a local area, and if you had to go and check your local police station, it's a good exercise, micro study. Charlene's an academic, but here's a micro study. Go to the police station in your local area, right across the country, whether it's a high income area or low income area, every Friday night is a ruckus in those areas, even in COVID-19. You may ask yourself why. Well, guess what? Domestic violence, pretty much perpetuated by male characters who are taking the lead. They want to be the protagonists in this work, so they are the lead actors. And then the supporting ruckus that happens around homes with women who are trying to care for their children. So if we went around the country, that's what we'd see. So Faith Action said, let's get on board. And amazingly, to the brilliant way in which collaboratives work, we were surprised at seeing the energy around people gathering. And now we're in the year of 2021 with the series. So also a shout out goes to Solidarity Trust, UN Women, We Will Speak Out, Heartlines, for being partners on this 120-day campaign, not just the 16 days of activism, but a 120-day campaign. So welcome to you all that are with us. I hope you're feeling excited about being in this conversation. Yes, with the lead, if I can say the lead guide, I'm just here to hang out in amazing conversational style. Today, I don't have my coffee cup, but I do have my Energade. So I don't know, Charlene, do you have your coffee cup or your Energade?
I'm fresh out of anything.
She's fresh out of anything. So if you need to, you're welcome to. But it's really just a conversational way for us to engage in amazing topics. So let's pause there. And I want to take a moment, like we do, in good, if I can say, African leadership style. Some of you might say, what's that about? Well, in Africa, we take time to honor the guests and the people that arrive. There's some Ubuntu and a culture of Ubuntu. So I just want to read, this is from the short bio sketch. There's a longer one. And if you look at the academic CV of who we have here, my word, the academic articles, and we in the same generation, Charlene, you've been busy, haven't you?
Well, Seth, in this landscape, they say publish or perish. So I somewhere in my background, I always have those words. To be honest, I wish I had more time to write and to reflect. I think it's a it's a beautiful practice, and somehow lately I've been thinking quite a bit about how writing could so profoundly be part of our spiritual practice. You know, it's a moment of taking stock, of reflecting, of balancing something between our contextual reality, a community of scholars, but also a vision or a dream for something else. And how is that different than prayer, right? So I'm trying to challenge myself a little bit about thinking about writing as prayer and not as another task that I need to do. But yeah, I've tried to, I think, straddle a complicated horse, in the sense that, and we'll probably get into this a little bit. I don't think I'm a garden variety academic. I haven't moved through the ranks in very traditional ways. I sort of came in by a side door, and I found a place in academia, but with very strong links to the NGO civil society sector, and also to faith and faith communities. I'm, for a long time, while I was based at the University of Stellenbosch, I did 3 jobs at the same time, you know, working in academia, working at inclusive and affirming ministries, and being a pastor in an inner city community in Maitland. And it was incredibly demanding and challenging, but also, you know, Seth, I think we've got knowledge economies in the world. So people will tell you what is knowledge and to who knowledge belongs. And I think my journey has taught me that we carry knowledge in our bodies, and it's not only the books we take from the library or that we order from Europe and America that teaches us things, but it's our encounters with each other and within communities. So I think there's always been wisdom for me in being involved in different places, but yeah, somehow, and I think due to the collaboration of wonderful partners, you know, who's challenged me to write and to keep on praxis reflecting as I move along. Yeah, I've written 1 or 2 things, and I'm in the process, always never meeting any deadlines.
You know, when I think about the writing and reflection piece, I'm reminded of one of my own, if I may say, mentor authors, Howard Thurman, and he says that life, and I'm paraphrasing, that life is like your working paper. And, you know, we even know that when we do our academic work, we have a life history method where, by and large, we're adding our life to it. And that's pretty much where I see some of your own journey personally, which we want to get into. But by way of just introduction, Professor, this is right. We have Professor van der Walt, Charlene van der Walt with us, is the head of the gender and religion at the School of Religion, Philosophy and Classics at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. Charlene, and as you can see, it's written up where I think she's okay with the first name calling. Charlene is the Deputy Director of Ujamaa Center of Biblical and Theological Community Development and Research, and can be contacted at vanderwalt@ukzn.ac.za. So she's accessible to us as we do this work with Charlene. And as an academic, as a person, I'm so happy to meet you, and in some way start a journey that I hope will be a beautiful journey of us staying connected, even in the space around faith in action. Charlene, as we get to know you, yes, we could go into the accolades, the academic stuff, but what's important about, you know, your story, your upbringing, what kind of brought you into the spouts of who you are, as people get to know not just the mindset or the academic career or the work that you're doing, but who is Charlene van der Walt, and what has been the pulse that has brought you into this world, and what keeps your heart and passion going?
Oh, Seth, those are actually a number of really important questions, and thank you for challenging me in asking it. You know, and I saw some of them here. Every year for the last decade, I've had the opportunity to meet very early late in January or early in Feb, I've had the opportunity over the last decade to meet 10 students in a program that we head up at currently at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, called the Masters in Gender, Sexuality and Religion. And I meet these students, and then one of the first things that I try to share with them before we start the work is to say, colleagues, you meet a bunch of academics on your journey for whom academic work is really important, and they bring passion and energy to this. And I count myself amongst those academics. But for me, the starting point of the work that I do is not an academic interest. It's not something that I park at the door when I enter a classroom or when I enter a conversation like this. My academic career has been born out and fed by my constant trying to make sense or meaning from my own embodied positionality. To make sense of how it is that I am the person I am, and there's a bunch of identity markers that we could, of course, connect to that. I'm a woman, I'm a white woman, I'm a middle-class white woman, I'm a queer woman. There's a bunch of things that we can connect to that. And those things, those identity markers, means different things in different spaces. Who I am in Cape Town is something different to who I am in KZN, and it's something different to who I am when I'm in the US, right? Our identity is contextual, and it's informed by our conversation partners and our location. And I think as I have had the privilege to move around in different spaces, my question has very much been the question that's the overarching theme for our reflection today is how is it that my sexuality, my orientation in terms of deep connection, my gender identity, the way that I express my gender, but then also my spirituality, my linking to life and to a life force and to a community that's sustained by life force. How is it that all of these things hold together? Because I think a remark that you made right at the beginning is a very accurate one. And a colleague of mine at the University of South Africa, Maripane Masenya, Professor Maripane Masenya, she wrote a beautiful article in which she spoke about the expectation that women should leave their brains at the door the moment they walk into faith communities. But I think that, said in a broader sense, often when we walk into faith communities, we're asked to leave our bodies at the door, to pretend like we're not our embodiment, like we're not our desire, like we're not our capacity to connect to people in a physical, emotional, and intellectual way. And I think much of my work is informed by the ongoing process of trying to figure out what is the links between these things and how does that sustain life and make life possible. I think that would be my introductory remarks.
You know, right there, that would be a launch of a new lecture, and if I like, you know, a podcast that we could just journey with you. I'm interested to ask, you know, as you're in the identity of, maybe as you said it, identities change from location, geography, where I'm at in the church, in the NPO, etc. But for the purposes of our conversation, when we think about the topic, and we're going to get into it in a moment, but I still want to anchor a little bit into your story. For people that are out there to understand the dislocation of people that are journeying in a spiritual journey. And if I may say, I'm a guy that has been in church. So I know that there's been irritations. It's like a love-hate relationship, especially around issues of justice or, you know, racism, gender bias, realities, where I love the church. I love the spirituality of the church. I love music. Even now, the season of Advent, you know, it's all about for me because I grew up singing hymns and carols. But Charlene, in your journey, you know, where for people to begin to grapple with the heart of exclusion, where was it, if I can say, a point of hurt and challenge? Because as you were finding yourself and asking the questions of who you are, because that's the power of your academic journey. It's actually linked to your story. It's linked to your question and pursuit of life, and who you are. So when it comes to, the communities of, maybe if I can say, faith sector communities, what has been some of the lonely trekking or walking where this has almost been, if I can call it a hurdle, maybe a hurdle is too light, maybe soul wrenching, where your spirituality was kind of being robbed from you because of the way you would define yourself by the identity of, just to say, I'm a queer woman.
Yeah, Seth, that's a brilliant question. And let me say that moment and these learnings is not something that I think happened in a moment. It's a continuous journey of learnings and becoming aware of how people would consider parts of who you are polar opposites or excluded to the faith discourse. But maybe a little story. When as I grew up and became aware of myself, and also start, in when we're 13 and 14, something happens in our bodies and we sort of become aware of other people in different ways. And as I start realizing my attraction is to women, I had a deep sense that I couldn't speak about it. I grew up in the Dutch Reformed Church. My parents were both very, very committed to a life of faith, and the landscape in which I grew up was very informed by faith. We would Sunday after Sunday church going folk, and I grew up in the church sort of, and all my earliest memories is about meeting friends at the church and roller skating in the hall, or climbing onto the roof of the church where we're not allowed to be, that sort of thing. I sort of was a church kid, and yet I knew, when I started becoming aware of my sexuality, I knew instinctively it was a weird sort of sense, intuitive sense, that there was nothing wrong with it. It was quite natural and beautiful, I would even say. My earliest encounters with beloveds. So there's something poetic and beautiful about it, that first love and discovering yourself and someone else and that sort of thing. But I had a very clear sense that it was almost like a secret. It was something that I needed to protect, because the landscape in which I grew up in definitely couldn't handle it, couldn't tolerate it. So I had a very keen sense of the fact that I always say that I don't think God had so much of a problem with it, but I knew the church had a problem. And yet, and Seth, this is another part of the complexity, this very keen sense of calling. I've always understood something of the ritual and the liturgy of faith. There's a language to faith that profoundly resonates to me, and that I understand at an embodied level. And so I had a deep sense of calling. And I remember when I was in high school and very, very naughty. I've always been a little bit outside of the norm. And then I think I was in grade 10 or something there, where you have to decide around your career. And the guidance teacher said, we must say what we're going to become. And I said, I'm going to become a minister of religion. And I remember my class bursting out in laughter, and everyone's like, dude, no, that cannot be the case. You won't fit in, whatever. But yet the doors opened for me, and I had the opportunity to study theology at Stellenbosch University and continue on that path to ministerial formation. And said when I got called into my first ministry in Makhanda in the Eastern Cape, which I love the Eastern Cape.
I wonder, Charlene, about Makhanda. Do you think that Wakanda came from Makhanda?
I think there's something there, Seth.
I think there's something there.
Maybe a little a mini reflection that we could have after this. When I was called into ministry in Grahamstown, before I went to Grahamstown, I ended a relationship with someone because I understood going into ministry as being called to this office, this position, this opportunity to hold space for people. And in my mind, I thought that my sexuality is something that couldn't be incorporated with this. And my time in Grahamstown and through incredible encounters with people in very intimate ways, I think that time in Grahamstown was foundationally informative to me. And I realized, so there was this, in the time that I was there, I would, every Sunday, you'd walk up onto the pulpit, and then there's just that moment where you've got to stop and pray before you go up to the top. And being very pious, I would go up halfway and I would stop. And I remember for a very long time, my prayer would be, "Dear Lord, please let things happen in this space despite of who I am, despite of the fact that I'm queer, that I don't fit, that I'm a problem to this faith landscape. Please let your spirit move in this service this morning." But said through my journey in Grahamstown, my prayer changed. The prayer of walking up that pulpit to, "Dear Lord, let something happen here this morning because of who I am. Not despite, but because of the fact that I understand what it means to be excluded, marginalized, discriminated against. I feel it in my body. And that makes me maybe someone uniquely situated in this space." And it was sort of a discovery of my own positionality and of the gift, and maybe we'll just explore this a little bit further, of the gift of my sexuality and my gender expression for faith communities and for the communities that I served. That was a very long answer, but there you have it.
A beautiful answer, and I want to build a bridge in, because I think as we are listening, those of us that are on Zoom, if you have any comments, and on Facebook Live, I know that there are people like Kenewa is there, Jill Harper, Carla Knutzer, and many others. And we've got Andile with me. So please, if you have a comment or kind of a hashtag and call it out, please put it into the chat box. You are welcome. And I'll try and accommodate it as we build the conversation. I hope you're enjoying the conversation. For those of you that just came on via Facebook Live, we are here with Charlene van der Walt. That's right. Charlene has mentioned a lot. She's told us a little bit about her story. She's even shared with us just in the last moment that we just came from, as I'm building this bridge to our focal topic, about being at church and in a pious tradition of the Reformed Church, having a moment for prayer. Charlene, as you shared that, it really struck me that I think that that's a real awakening for people to work with the embodiment of being dislocated. And that dislocation, to own it, to let it live in you, and not just to say, in spite of me, but Lord, because of your grace that is for me, with who I am, where I come from, with all that you've given me. I mean, in my context, it'll be with my soccer and my mutton curry and my music and my bad behavior and my upbringing in Southside Joburg and further south from being born in KwaZulu-Natal in Chatsworth. All of that, with all of that, Lord, and the mistakes I've made, I'm here as your servant. And when I begin with, as you said that, it was a profound moment for me, because I think that that's a justice connection issue right there. People start to embrace who they are, and that there's a lot more room for us, those that know the experience of being dislocated, marginalized, those that are said you don't belong. You actually, you're a misfit. I think you even said it in one of the spaces, that I didn't fit. But there are many people that are living with that identity. I don't belong. I'm a so-called misfit. And when you start to own it, when your story becomes yours to hold and embody, I mean, it's interesting, like you said, your prayer steps into a different way. It's kind of reformed and transformed, not in spite of me, but with me and who I am. So as we go into that, Charlene, this journey has led you into, if I can say it, dropping it like it's hot on the topic. The topic for the day that people, some people might have just seen the poster and got scared, because that's the reality. Like in South Africa, people talk about courageous conversations. But if we talk about the other, whoever the other may be, many folk are standing in one side of the railway tracks, and they might come from the other that has the acceptance. By and large, those of us that have been watching history, this is what it is. We stand on our side of the railway tracks, we exclude the other, and we don't even know them. Even though we might feel we have a right not to know them, we've never even thought, well, shouldn't I know them if I want to work with them, if I want to change them? Even if you thought, well, let me get to the queer woman, let me sort her out, let me get Jesus inside of her. I don't know, but this is the reality that we find. In the practice of doing justice work, many folk who are coming from the space of power, a space of knowing that they in the numbers of majority, and when I talk about majority, I'm talking about majority of numbers. But in South Africa, in our context, majority of numbers means nothing, because we've got majority of economy. We've got majority of race identity. We've got majority of geography and education. It gives you a majority identity complex. So in light of this topic, many people would have just been scared. Integrating what? Spirituality and sexuality? Oh no! How can I think God when I'm thinking sex? How can I think God when I'm thinking sexual orientation? How can I think God when I'm thinking gender identity? So friends, right here, I'm saying it's a courageous conversation. Charlene has been true to herself, her story, her work through the academic work and journey. So Charlene, feel free, like I like to say, drop it like it's hot. What should we be critically thinking as a thought leadership insight around this topic of integrating spirituality and sexuality? What do you have to offer us today as we begin to think broader, deeper, wider, and if I may even say, for the sake and the love of God?
Seth, some of the things that you've now mentioned really resonated with me, and with developing work in this area and living my life in this area. I think one thing that you sort of touched on is who gets to speak within faith communities around issues of human sexuality, and what is the topics that's being discussed in those places. So it's very interesting that that LGBTI people and queer people, so those who have identities in this marker of strangeness, LGBTIQ, they are often considered an issue on the agenda or a topic for discussion. And the conversation usually starts from those who are not part of that community, so those who identify outside of that community, drawing on a tradition of faith and a way of engaging with the sources of faith, both tradition, biblical text, and then talking about people. And Seth, I think that is foundationally one of the biggest problems in this landscape. The insistence of those with power, so those who live within the norm, and the norm in terms of sexual orientation and gender identity is is those who identify within heteronormativity, who would say, I'm a man attracted to women. My body aligns with my identity expression. There's a straight line. It's very clear. When I walk into a room, people read me as a man, and what it means to be a man is very clearly identified. For those in the position of normativity, I think within faith spaces, the power of the conversation has been informed, and the theme and the direction of the conversation has been informed by those who do not situate themselves in the position of the subject, so those who are being talked about. And what's interesting further to that is that, and I think it's an interesting conversation that we need to have more seriously in faith communities. It's interesting that conversations around sex and gender has completely been taken up. So all the oxygen has been sucked into talking about other people and other people who are somehow considered strange or other. As if, say, we are not all embodied human beings. As if we are not all people who navigate life and faith and our understanding of the world through touch, encounter, recognition, through seeing and engaging with the other. It's weird how in the church we've made sexuality a problem and the problem of the queers. As if the work of integrating our embodiment and our sexuality is not the work of everyone. It's foundational to a journey of self-actualization and becoming who we are. Is that making peace with my embodiment? And yet somehow, if you're straight and often white and cisgendered, then somehow you don't have to reflect about your identity or your positionality. It's a taken for granted reality. So I think this is a problem, but it's also an incredible gift that I think courageous LGBTI activists and change makers has brought to the church, to say, beloveds, let's stop kidding ourselves that we understand what it means to be fully human. Let's stop pretending like we know what it is, because we haven't done the work yet of thinking about the integration of that which is most intimate to us. Because what is our navigation of faith other than longing for an encounter with God and with others? I mean, that is what faith is, right? It's this orientation or this directedness to an encounter. And the only way in which we know the intimacy of encounter is, or maybe the most profound way through which we know the intimacy of encounter is through our experience of that which is branded and considered sexual. So, I mean, I think maybe a first point would be to say that there is much work to be done in this process of trying to bring sexuality and spirituality together into a conversation.
You know, they say language is power and language can lead us in our thinking. So I'm grateful for Marisha's insight, because even if we talk about grace for, then it can mean we need grace because of sin. And Marisha points out here, well, you know, and if I can bring in a voice, she says, not that God is giving me grace for my indifference, not in spite, but because God loves me, loves that about me, not an aspect of grace. I mean, it's interesting right there, not to be constructed by a sin construct. I'm the other, I'm left out. You know, it's the construct of love. I'm embraced. I'm defined by this embrace rather than the fact that I need grace because of my sin. And if we can think about a theology of grace in that way, it kind of changes the lingo. I mean, also, we can talk about faith sector, but I have a lot of my experience also in the corporate sector. And just like we would say, oh, so what does it mean to be cisgender and straight? I mean, we've been in corporate conversations around DE and I, where we're touching topics of race, class, and gender. And people would say, well, I'm straight. That would be the lingo right up. I'm straight. I'm a man and I'm straight. And then one woman who was in the consult, Charlene, she had the courage to shake this room and said, so what are you saying? If I'm a woman, am I crooked? If I'm queer, if I describe myself as gay and lesbian, am I crooked? And so language also brings meaning and how we appropriate that language onto people. I also pick up on what Charlene said about the fact if we are practitioners in the space of our faith organizations, our corporate organizations, our everyday life with our families. I mean, stop talking about those who are defined as the other and leaving them in the margins. Get to know them. Move the margin to the center. Those of you that are academics out there and theologians, or maybe you just like to say, I'm about ideas. Working with people who do not look like you, act like you, or you feel that they cut from a different cloth. Stop leaving those people in the margins. Bring them to the center. We're going to move into our next mode of the way we carry this conversation. And it's about the challenge. So we kind of heard Charlene in a reflective way of talking about, this leadership insight. I've brought some summary of lingo and language, but think about how do we engage, whether it's in our synods, our presbyteries, our local religious organizations, our NGOs or corporate. If the person is defined as the so-called other, they are not the one who fits the so-called sense of normativity or heteronormativity. Well, how do we bring their life experience? So don't just talk about people, let them be involved in the conversation with you. There's a lot more learning. So that's kind of the leadership insight. But I also said, drop it like it's hot, Charlene. Encourage us, but also shake us up. Get us a wake-up call. In German, they say it, it's almost swearing. It's like legal swearing in German. Wach auf! Can you imagine saying that on a Sunday morning? Or if you were in the mosque and there my imam rocked up and he said, Wach auf! Afrikaans is also quite nice. It says, Skrut wakker! So, Charlene, this is the time to shake us up. You've had practice, you're working in this with NGOs. Ujamaa kind of fits into the place of academia, but I've met some of your people in a bridge that we did about 2 or 3 weeks ago that love the experience of studying in a space. One of our pastoral friends that came from a Methodist church spoke about how it stretched him, not just about academic reflection, but to actually be in the space of practice. So, my dear friend Charlene, what do you want to do to say to us, hey, people that are here today, wach auf, it's time to wake up. What's the challenge for us to take away?
Say thank you. That's also a very important lead-in, and thank you for saying the sort of summary remarks that you've just made. I think two or three things comes to mind at the moment, and the first thing is something that annoys me to no end, and it speaks to something that you've connected and that Marisha is also now referred to is somehow this very pious discourse that often functions in the church of let us love the sinner. Love the sinner and hate the sin. I think that's the discourse. And then sin is constructed as my sexuality and the way that I encounter others in a sexual way or in the expression of my gender identity. And I think as people informed by liberation theology and made aware, conscientized about the systemic nature of sin, I think we've done a great amount of work around socioeconomic justice and the structural nature of sin in socioeconomic justice. We've done through the Kairos movement incredible work around race and the structural nature of oppression in racism. But somehow, Seth, there's something really important, and maybe the most important question that faith communities in the contemporary South African context need to ask themselves is, why is it that the jury is still out around the humanity of LGBTI people? Why is it that it is so? It's really interesting for me whenever we set up conversations around sexuality and spirituality, or we get called in as Ujamaa to speak around the issues of sexuality, then it's always like, guys, just pace yourself. We don't want to scare people off with being too radical. Let us just like hold our horses, because, and what underlies that is this idea or this understanding that LGBTI people are not human. They somehow in a subclass, they are considered less than human. And I think that's probably the first issue that we need to address, and that we need to ask ourselves very serious questions about, especially as a country who has in an embodied way lived with the legacy of dehumanization. And the Dutch Reformed Church, maybe in the most profound way, you know, how we've used theology and our understandings of the Bible to strip people of their humanity. And of course, this is not a new thing. It's a mechanism of othering and dehumanization. It's not new to our contemporary society. If you look at that beautiful story in the beginning of Exodus, it starts with this, the Pharaoh died and there was a new Pharaoh and they didn't know Joseph. So all of a sudden, the Hebrew people in Egypt became cockroaches. They became vermin, right? Subhuman. This is a discourse that's been taken over through different historical periods, stripping people of their humanity. Because if you're not human, then I can exclude you, or I can pretend like you're not there, or I can annihilate you at worst. And you made the remark right in the beginning of the conversation around people in faith communities saying we need to sort out the lesbians by preaching the gospel to them. Seth, it's a very, very short step from we need to sort people out with the gospel to we need to annihilate people. And we live in a country where people are erased, where their bodies are erased in our society because they represent that which is different. So I think probably one of the biggest challenges to faith communities at the moment is to say, how do we engage our doctrine of sin in order to move away from individual and embodied understandings of sin to structural understandings of sin, to understand that the structures and the systems that we put in place dehumanize and exclude people. And one of my students are on this call, Zamanchali Dlamini. She's just done incredible work around how our theological notions, these theologies that we hold so dear, oh, Jesus is with us in our suffering, how these theological notions keep people in places of dehumanization. We keep people in places of suffering because of our good theologies. And some of my other colleagues, I see them here. This is the hard work we do in the program, is to say those theological notions that you hold so dear and that you think is so brilliant, it strips people of their humanity. It keeps people in situations of oppression. So, I mean, I think we need to think through the ramifications of our theological thinking and our theological constructs, because the things that we hold dear might strip others of their life and their humanity.
Wow, friends, I hope you're soaking it in, and I hope it's in a base of where you're at and you're hearing I want to just kind of draw from this point of the good theology. And one of the writers I enjoyed reading, where he focuses on James L. Massey. He's late now, but he spoke about the connection to the Samaritan, the Good Samaritan. And he just puts a question out there. Who said that the Good Samaritan was good? Why wasn't the Good Samaritan a merciful Samaritan? Why wasn't the Samaritan a Samaritan of fairness and compassion? Who said, you got to have a good Samaritan? And again, language, because these good theologies we've learned, as you said, Charlene, it has stripped people of their humanity. The so-called good theologies. I also know that when we talk within faith sector, people really struggle. They really, really struggle when you think about it. They want to live justice, but they don't want to hear it in the context of people speaking about it. I know folk that would say, listen, we known for our work in like, so say that you may have heard this, the colleagues that are with us that are online via Zoom and Facebook Live. They said, don't tell me that you're preaching to the choir. And what I'm learning, Charlene, is even for folk that have made space, now leave alone the folk that are those conservative, this is the way. We believe in a binary society. Boys must wear blue, girls must wear pink. Men shouldn't be washing the dishes. I mean, can you imagine if yes, I identify as a male. I identify as an African Indian male, but just to wash dishes was a big story in our community. Just to change diapers of my child became words where you would kind of, you'd say, no, you're not a man. You're not a whole man for you to be doing that. And so some of the goodness that we've been taught, I mean, this is a challenge that I'd like to say to you all as Faith Action continues to build in the 120-day campaign. Get naughty. You got to get a bit naughty out there. If you haven't been a bit naughty, you gotta get a bit naughty. And in that kind of way, you're going to have to ask those naughty questions. You're going to have to push on the naughty impulse. You're going to have to say, who said so? Why should I look like this? Why can't I wear shorts if I'm supposed to be in some religious space? And those critical questions kind of need to shake up. And so I don't know, it would be awesome if we take some of these fantabulous words, I call them, and start to talk about a naughty theology. So challenge out there, those of us, maybe we need to drop away and say to ourselves, if we've learned an ideology, if we've learned a way of thinking, if we've learned a theology that keeps us in an enclave, in a cocoon of the so-called goodness, you might want to bust out of that, because who said the Good Samaritan was good? Let's find some other language and move ourselves along. So those of us, I mean, Charlene, you also spoke about, death, because, I mean, you kind of codified it in softer words. But because a person is queer, because a person is gay, because a person is lesbian, they die. And in KwaZulu-Natal, where the Ujamaa Center is kind of, part of UKZN, I mean, it's got high levels of these happenings taking place. So this is a justice topic, the humanity of people, their rights to breathe, their rights to just live their lives to their full potential, their rights to enjoy their family without being endangered by people taking their lives. How have some of your students at the Ujamaa Center picked up on this work? I mean, like, we've got one of your students online. Because what I'm interested in, Charlene, and this is a little bit more on the call to service, is how do we take from our learning and not just come around and have tea and cake? Because that's also the reality. People come around and we have good intellectual happening. It happens in great theology schools. They make people wakker. And I have to be honest, my irritation, personally, Charlene, is when I meet people, they're also sweet and they're also academically hoo-ha. But when you get down and if I say the rubber hits the road, we're still chilling, writing papers and publishing, and people are dying.
Yeah.
People are dying. And then when we go down from the academic circles to the pulpits, we're not preaching it because the councils are saying to us, hey, that's too much of a hot topic right here. So Charlene, how do we make it stick? How do practitioners and people that are online today, if it's just a first step in the direction to waking up to the fact that people who are the other, the so-called other, the gender identified other, the racial other, if you like, the class other. In this case, the other, that's sexuality, their gender identity makes them not belong. How do we move to serving them with a critical awareness that we're not just eating tea and cake at conferences?
Oh, Seth, you're speaking the things to my heart. Thank you for that lead in again. I think I love this notion of the naughty scholarship and a framework that has, so I think there's two sort of classic frameworks that's deeply informed my own work and also the work of the program and the work we do at the Ujamaa Center. First, this feminist theory, this insistence on doing theological work or academic work or reflection from the embodied lived reality of those who experience these realities. So in my program, fun. Thank you. Always good to have a little interlude. I think students within the program and the work we do at the
I was on mute. I gotta acknowledge that. Alexandra, thank you for waking us up. You wanted a naughty moment right there.
Yeah, I must say I'm not surprised or taken aback. This is the nature of the work we do. I think we draw on two frames. So the first is feminist theory, insisting on the doing work from the embodied lived reality of those affected by a specific reality. But then says, linking to your naughty scholarship, theory and thinkers and practitioners working from a queer positionality and drawing on queer theory has been profoundly important for the work we do. So what queer theory thinks about is to say that these things that we consider normal or straightforward or taken for granted, these are constructed realities. And we need to destabilize, to trouble, to make trouble with those things that are considered normal and non-negotiable. And I think I see some of my students here, and I know some of them are also on Facebook Live. It calls for brave scholarship and brave engagement, Seth. It calls for us to do work and reflection from our own bodies, to do it in community with others. And you said a really important thing about also community of others that we don't agree with. Because we live our lives in echo chambers, right? On my Facebook, everyone does triathlon and is serious about LGBTI issues. Because that's the little echo chamber that I've created online for myself. We need to start venturing into conversation spaces that's not so safe or not so comfortable, where everyone doesn't understand the liturgy or the lingo, the speak. I was just in this week, I was in a meeting where I could sense that there's a little bubble in which people function where they all just speak the same language. We need to start fracturing those communities that's so stable and so sorted out. And then I think a question that's informed a lot of our work, and I loved the stuff that you said around, sitting, and that maybe that's why I'm struggling to write papers, sitting in an office and drinking coffee and writing papers, is this hounding and haunting question of so what? So what of my work? So what of my preaching? So what of my liturgy? How does what I do here make life possible for others? Also those who are not considered worth thinking about. And I think, the challenge of the church is maybe it's sexy or cool for us to be on the right side of the race discourse or on the right side of the class discourse. Maybe we understand the economy of those things. but we need to seriously reflect on our positionality in terms of the sexuality and gender discourse.
Wow. Friends, I hope you've enjoyed this time with Charlene van der Walt, our call to service. Pick it up. Here we go. We have a look at hashtag queer theory. Get involved with a program where you go and meet people, even if it's online. I know that we've got 19,000 cases now nationally. So, you know, it would be best if we kind of stay home and keep ourselves safe in a COVID-19 pandemic. But I think the idea, even on your Facebook page or your social networks, are you only relating to people who act like, think like, feel like you? Make space, accommodate, and work in this way. We're going to close out now with our closing kind of comments. You know, we can keep it in a tweet, so we won't make it a post. Charlene, we can, if you'd like a hashtag or tweet, but because you're the focused person that has given us some things to think about today, you can get a tweet. But I'd like to say, watch out for this. As Charlene closes in this 120 campaign, I'm going to be taking you to a highlight piece of music that's going to say, stand up and be counted. So my hashtag to all of you out there, those that are here, whether you're a student in your practice, don't wait for tomorrow. If you're studying currently and you're at a university or you're in prep for training, if you're a manager in a corporate place of work, don't wait for tomorrow. Start using your place now and create impact. Clear up your WhatsApp communications. If people are talking stupid stuff out there, you know, raise a naughty question. Raise and say, where do you get your information from? Engage them. Don't be scared. And I think that's what our series of conversations has been calling us to, courageous conversations. So my hashtag, before Charlene does the closing of the show, is hashtag stand up and be counted. Over to you, Charlene, as you close us out.
Colleagues and friends, Seth and the team, thank you so much for the opportunity to be amongst you and to think with you. And colleagues, as always, this is an invitation. This is not work that we do in academia on our own. Or it's not work reserved for certain cool or clever people. It's the work of people committed to justice. So Seth, I'm linking myself to you and I'm saying, let's join the conversation. It's an invitation to change. Thank you.
I'm right on it. I'm in. Ujamaa Center, the head of religious studies and that unit, Professor, that's right, Professor van der Walt was here, you all. Professor van der Walt, my hands up. I'm available. If I can bring what I've learned, if I can bring what I can do in the way through the work I do in the NGO space, in the development space, in the church space, in the corporate space. Come on, everybody, let's stand up and be counted. As we close out, the 120-day campaign is still happening. Charlene van der Walt set us up with some thinking about integrating spirituality and sexuality. We're having a few more sessions come up over this next month. From me, Seth Naiker, out here, right here in LA. You're 100% right. Not Los Angeles, but Lower Alberton. We want to say peace out and enjoy this piece of music that captures the heart and spirit of doing good. It was meant to be a promo for a national move. It actually became a company that Heartlines was a part of, but the tail end of it says stand up and be counted. So if you're going to be just enjoying a Thursday afternoon rhythm and vibe, please DJ Andile, spin that track. Peace out, everybody. Till we see you all again. Thank you very much.
Well, there's many jokes going around about us South Africans. Jokes like, how do you know you're in South Africa? Ooh, my watch is gone. First there was white power, and then black power, and now there's no power. What is the future of this country?
What is the future?
Our country. The country our brothers and sisters fought and died. Who's going to make it work? Who's going to make it right? Who's going to make it great for good?
The government.
Government. No, we can't wait for government.
No, we can't wait.
This is something we must do for ourselves. You and me. We must change this country for good. You say how? And you say, hey, Des, it's impossible. I say we've done it before.
We've done it before.
From the 4 trackers to freedom, to winning the 2010 World Cup bid. No one can tell us what is and isn't possible. If we, the everyday people, do something, just a small something,
Just a small
for good,
something.
for good.
I can see the light, and the future is bright. Cause I'm a dreamer. And if we all just try to keep our dreams alive, we'd be believers. I can see the light, and the future is bright. Cause I'm a dreamer.
I'm a dreamer, you a dreamer, we all dreamers, let's dream.
And if we all just try to keep our dreams alive, we'd be believers.
I'm a dreamer, you a dreamer, we all dreamers, let's dream.
Volunteer at an AIDS clinic. Report a crime. Join a neighborhood watch. Take responsibility for our own families. Be honest in our daily dealings.
Be honest in our daily dealings.
These smallanyana things
These small
will
things,
add up.
they will add
Nothing can stop the power of millions acting
up.
for
Power
good.
of millions.
There's no destiny we cannot fulfill.
There's no
No
destiny.
force that can stand in our
No
way.
force.
So stand up. Be counted. Begin the next great chapter in our history for good. SMS good to 32197 or log on to forgood.co.za.